take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Dixon.
Present.
Mr. Rollins.
Here.
Mr. Scrivano.
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Here.
Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Connor.
Here.
Mr. Escobedo.
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Rod and Connor, who are working behind the scenes with our production of our board's broadcast on Channel 20. So thank you guys for all you do. And we will move now to Mr. Earl Dotson Jr. for recognizing and celebrating outstanding contributions of our students and staff.
Good evening. Hello, board members. Select Rockford Public School seniors will continue in the education pathway this fall at Rockford University. These students are not only our graduating seniors, but they are our future teachers.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That's worthy of applause. Thanks to a partnership with Rockford University, they will do their student teaching in our schools, and they will have priority placement for available teaching jobs in RPS 205 when they receive their degree. If hired, they can work to receive a master's degree in urban teaching from Rockford University. And here's the best part, for free.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Congratulations to these students. We are thrilled about your investment in education and your investment in the Rockford community. And so please bear with me. I'm going to say your names, and so I'm going to try my best here. So from Auburn High School, we have Michael Rolando, Bria Grothman, Linnell Perez Salcedo, Zakia Coleman, Mario Beltran Gutierrez, and Diana Sanchez Arieta from Auburn High School. All right, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Go Knights.
Yeah.
Earl, can they stand as you say each of their names? Just we could put a name with a face and then stay standing.
Okay, all right.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. East High School, we have Melanie Haben. Did I say that right? All right. Haben, Melanie Haben, Andrea Manriquez Rodriguez, Melissa Salcedo, Christopher Hodge, Yasina Lozano, and Marissa Salcedo. All right.
All right.
From Guilford High School, we have Angelina Vernola and Victoria Medina. All right. And then from Jefferson High School, Miranda Johnson, Haley Brown, Kaylee Cruz, and Joshua Perea Hernandez.
All right.
All right, so now what I need all of you to do is all come on up front, please. All the names that I called, and just, if you would, please, just make your rounds around the board members, please. Congratulations.
Very excited for you. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Getting recognized twice tonight, right? Remember the E-Raps too?
Congratulations. Are you excited?
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well done. Congratulations. Look forward to you
Congratulations.
finishing and coming back.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Excited to be working with you. Congratulations.
This is pretty cool. This is real
Congratulations.
cool.
Thanks for coming out, guys. Congratulations. Excited to work
Way
with
to
you.
go. All right.
Congratulations.
And as we know that, this journey is never alone. So if there are family members and other who are related to those folks, those students, we want to give you a round of applause too. So give them a round of applause. And we know there's staff and teachers and other educators who also help out. So a round of applause for all those folks. Yeah, I see y'all over there. All right. How's this, Mr. Connor? Nah.
Okay.
The East High School made big news and history. Yeah, the Nick 10 champs in the house. They in the house. When they advanced to the IHSA State Boys Basketball Tournament and returned with a fourth-place trophy. The ERABs made history in other ways, too. The season marked East's first trip to the state tournament in 41 years. The ERABs played in the highest-scoring 4A state game in history, their semifinal game against Evanston. And after this season, senior Chris Burnell is the second highest scorer in RPS 205 history. He's only 91 points behind Auburn's alum and NBA player Fred VanVleet. Head coach Roy Sackmaster also played every player on the team in the first half of the third-place game, the final game of the season. Sackmaster told the Chicago Sun-Times, "I'm very proud of our complete team effort. We wanted to get everybody at least a little bit of a run and say that they played in the state finals. And even more than the stats, we want to congratulate this team for not only their outstanding accomplishments, but their outstanding sportsmanship during this historic season that woke up the ERAB fan base, which is generations deep." Yes. And of course, we know, once an ERAB, always an ERAB. So congratulations, they're in the house tonight. Let's give
All
it up.
right.
Very proud of you. I watched all the games.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Coming out tonight.
Very proud of you guys. Amazing.
Congratulations again. Nice job.
And I'm an old West grad, and let me tell you, you guys got me excited.
You're going to win it over the West Warriors.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Look at how happy the alumni base is.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, sir. That is all.
Okay, thank you. So proud of all of you. And it was National Teacher Appreciation Week last week, I believe, correct? It was. So congratulations to all our teachers and our future teachers. So we are moving on now to the petitions and communication portion of our meeting, when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communication portion of our agenda. According to Board Policy 2.230, the public comments portion of the meeting is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you will be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow for sufficient time for the business of the board and to conduct our meetings in an efficient and effective manner, we are requesting that you comply with the guidelines that are posted, and each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such meetings. I will call 2 names if the first person to speak and then the next person, if that next person would move towards the front. That would help us with our time. You also have a clock on the wall that will help you with your 2 minutes to guide you on that. We thank you for your interest and your cooperation with our guidelines. Our first speaker tonight is Jeff Dubeck, to be followed by Epi Adami. Hi. Well, let's turn your mic on. There we go.
Yes. Hi. I'm Jeff Dobeck. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Hillman School. I've been teaching for 6 years. I've been using Seesaw religiously for 3.
Okay.
And I'm here just to talk about a few things that I use Seesaw for every single day. The first thing is I take a picture. I have solved the what did you learn today? I don't know, or nothing. What I do is I'll take a picture of what they're doing, usually a phonics skill or a math activity, and underneath I'll comment, we did this, ask your child to explain it to you. So they go home, they have a wonderful conversation, and they don't have to ask, what did you learn today?
Sure.
Another thing, I would like to talk about Dojo for a second. A lot of teachers know it. You can give them points for doing something correct. You can take away points for doing something negative. And what I've seen in the past 3 years, because I used to use Dojo, is when I give them a point for picking up a piece of paper and throwing it in the garbage, their parent gets a notification, and they think, good job, my child is awesome. When they do something like, when they don't listen to me, I can take away a point, and it comes up on their phone, being disrespectful, lost a point. Some parents will call you immediately and say, what did my child do? I want to talk to them now. I'm not doing that anymore. What I'm doing is I'm taking a picture of them holding up something that they did by themselves, and they're smiling, and then they get to ask them when they get home, what did you do? Can you explain it to me? So with Seesaw, what kind of the big thing is I'm going to be teaching about it when the next year starts. What I'm going to do is kind of show them what I do and raise the bar for all teachers. Hopefully all of them will copy what I'm doing and kind of join along. And it's all easy things that everyone can do. For example, one of my students, she comes not very often, and I talked to her mom about it, and it's out of my hands. And
I'm going to ask you to wrap up because your 2-minute time is up. Okay.
No problem. But I'll just say I had her count by tens, and she could not do it. Then her mom said a few seconds later, I will work with her at home. And that's something that she can do. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, my student comes up to me and says, can I show you I can do this skill? And it's a Common Core standard. She wants to do it, and it's one of the best feelings ever when they want to
Great.
show you what they can do.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank
Epi Adami to be followed by Janice Fossey.
Good evening, board members. I'm a first grade teacher at Carlson School, and I also am a proponent of Seesaw. So I've struggled for years, many years, to convey to parents the standards, our expectations, the progress of their child on a regular basis. With Seesaw, my communication with my parents and the documentation of student achievement has changed exponentially for me. Today's parents, they might not check child's backpacks, but they'll check their phone when they get a ping. And they can see right away what their child is doing in my classroom. It's like Facebook, but for learning now. And the parents in my classroom love it. I share pictures of events, student work, recordings, presentations. I'm able to get also to that higher level of teaching. My kids have to not only share their knowledge, but they have to tell comprehension, application, synthesis of their learning. I even used it for student-led conferences. My parents love it, like I said. They don't wonder what we're doing because every day they know. And I communicate those expectations of assignments and also can show them where their child should be if they're not. There's no question for me about student performance. But because I report regularly, I have the opportunity to work with them before the end of the trimester if there are things they need to work on, rather than wait till that last minute. My students especially love it. Every child wants to share what they are learning. And so they get to show their understanding, they get to celebrate their work, and they take pride in what they are presenting to their parents. I love it. I got to tell you, it saves me a lot of teaching time. Instead of pulling kids one at a time, I can have all my kids do something on there, and then I can do it later to see how things were performing. I can then pull small groups for that. It has been a valuable tool in my teaching.
Thank you, Epi.
You are very welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Janice Fossey to be followed by Emily Daub.
Good evening. I'm not a teacher. I'm just a parent.
Okay. That's a good
sorry.
thing. That's a good thing. Okay. So are we. Okay.
My daughter Zoe is 6 years old. She's in kindergarten at Whitehead. I homeschooled her for preschool because it was very hard to let go because she's our only child. I got a message today that she exceeded her math growth goal on the MAP test. And I was delighted to hear that, but I wasn't surprised. And the reason I wasn't surprised is because I have been able to watch her progress through Seesaw. I was very nervous sending her to school this year, both for the emotional connection and because I didn't know what to expect. You know, I haven't been in school in years. And I didn't know what it was like anymore. And Seesaw provides a window into the classroom that we never had. You know, I could say to my, oh, I didn't do anything today. And she didn't know any better. You know, I can see exactly what's happening. I can see how she's doing in the different subjects. I can see where I need to step in and say, oh, look, you know, I saw you struggling with this on Seesaw. Let's work on it tonight and improve her skills and help her to grow. And most importantly, I can see her face, I can hear her voice, and I know she's okay. And that is absolutely invaluable. I can't walk into the classroom all the time because they get mad when you do that. I really expected this year to be harder because she's my whole world, you know, and send her off to a stranger. But it turns out she had an excellent teacher, and Whitehead, by the way, is the best school in the world, just so you know. And then with this app like Seesaw, I can see that she's enjoying herself, she's learning, and she's thriving. And that's money well spent. I mean, that is absolutely invaluable.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Emily Daub. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Emily Daub, and I'm a kindergarten teacher at Whitehead Elementary School. I have been utilizing Seesaw in my kindergarten classroom with my students and my first grade students for the last 4 years. This platform allows even our youngest learners to document and publish their academic progress and learning. My students utilize the app daily to record themselves read, publish their writing, and solve math problems. The level of student engagement in my classroom is heightened because of this technology. In addition, my students are internally driven to be successful and showcase their learning for their teacher and families to see, and they're 5. As an educator, I am able to use the student portfolios as evidence when making instructional decisions and differentiate learning for all students. For example, when my students record themselves reading a leveled text, I have an instant running record at my fingertips. I can evaluate the student's accuracy while reading the text, as well as use the video to initiate a reading conference with the student. I have been able to use the free trial of the skills component of this program, and I can tell you that it appropriately aligns to what I'm doing in the classroom and with our district curriculum and goals for students. What sets this technology apart from what we already have is the level of student communication embedded in the process and the electronic portfolio that is created by students. I will continue to use Seesaw with my future classes. This technology works for all our students, and I eagerly look forward to introducing my kindergarten students to it next fall at Ellis.
Okay.
I know I can't directly correlate my students' MAP assessment success to the use of Seesaw in my classroom, but I will say that the level of student investment and engagement surely sets the tone for success. And as a shout out to my kindergarten students, today 85% of my class exceeded their math MAP scores.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. We love hearing from teachers and parents. Yeah, thank you all for being here. I will open the floor then to board members for any board member comments. Mr. Rollins.
First off, I got to say how strange it is to be sitting over here. I think I've been sitting over there for 6 straight years. But I suppose that a different perspective is good.
Yeah.
You know, and change is good, but, you know, not all change is good, I guess. And one of the changes I'd like to talk about is tonight is the last board meeting for Mr. Escobedo, who has resigned from the board and will be,
Actually, he'll be at one more.
one more? Okay.
One more.
All right, well, I'll say it anyway.
Okay.
I've appreciated having Mr. Escobedo on the board. He brings a different perspective than a lot of us. He's an engineer. That's a perspective that I think has been very valuable for the board, and I'll say that I'm going to miss you. So I'll say it again next week, but maybe
Okay.
privately. Thanks.
Very good. Mr. Connor.
So I second that, but I'm going to leave my comments about Mr. Escobedo, who's done fabulous work, till the next board meeting. And I know this is going to be a shocker, but woo,
Go
he's
eat
tight.
Rabs. Huh? Okay. Mr. Siegel.
Mine's going to be a little more wordy, which that will come as a surprise to nobody. You didn't have to finish for me. But I'm actually going to speak as a parent and not as a board member. So this is going to sound a little bit formal. Okay, I can do it.
Okay.
Good evening, board members.
Okay.
Superintendent Jarrett, cabinet members, administrators, principals, teachers, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, nutrition services staff, security, custodians, coaches, volunteers, parents, and members of the community of Winnebago and Boone counties. This Friday will mark the final day of the state-mandated free and appropriate public education for my son, Matt Siegel, a partnership among all of you and my family. All of you have consistently come to work to do which passion compels you to do, and I and my family did what we as citizens and parents must do. And we joined forces to educate and grow an excellent student, citizen, and person. As I have said before in this place, accomplishing such an amazing task could not be completed by myself, even with the help of my family. Matt has had so many experiences connected to school that have shaped the person he is now. Field trips, athletic and arts participation, service opportunities, parking tickets. In this partnership, we did our basics of paying our taxes, getting Matt as ready to learn each day as we could, and making sure he understands the importance of the education presented to him. In addition, we have tried to flesh out as best we could those things that he learned in school, but I must admit to not being nearly as smart as he is, nor as those charged with educating him. In the time allotted, or any amount of time for that matter, it would be impossible to appropriately express my gratitude to all those responsible for upholding their end of the partnership, but that does not excuse me from trying. I have a list of every single teacher he's had, every principal, every coach. I even listed some of the bus drivers, but it's going to take all night to go through all of them. But just to give you a little context, we went through 35 core teachers, 16 specials teachers, only 3 principals. We actually had more superintendents than that.
Okay.
9 coaches, and Officer Sockwell. All of you hold an enormous debt of gratitude that I am trying to begin repaying tonight. In the final analysis, it is my family's pledge that we will not take your work for granted. I hope you found that we too upheld our end of the partnership. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Very nice. Okay, very nice. Couple things I want to mention. First of all, a big shout out, thank you to Mrs. Detman for the communication you sent out about student retention. I think you did your homework, and it was read by a whole lot of people, and mostly teachers, so I appreciate you doing that. And second, Earl and Heidi and myself and David are on this Erickson EDI project team for Readiness to Learn. And last Friday, we got to see the first maps. So the data is in. There were almost 2,000 kindergarten students surveyed on their readiness to learn, and this included public and private schools in our district area. And some of the data is surprising, and some of it's not surprising. We haven't seen all of it yet, but it is our plan that the board will receive a presentation on the results of that survey and the data. And that's just the first part of that. Community Foundation is going to bring Dr. Nagel back so that if you didn't get a chance to hear him in person, you can hear him again, or you can go and watch him on the video that's been posted. So, but basically, his message is that how kids perform in the first, their personal experiences in the first, 1,100 days of their life shape a lot of their ability to learn. So, very valuable message. And so the board will get to see some of that data. And Heidi and I were talking tonight about maybe doing that in July. The kindergarten teachers are getting their reports next week, June 4th, so a few weeks away. So real exciting stuff, a lot of work. And I will say a lot of work to be done, because once we identify where the vulnerabilities are in the neighborhoods throughout our district, the community then has to figure out how we're going to solve some of those vulnerabilities with services to children before they get to kindergarten. So anyway, wanted to share that thought with you. So do you want to add anything to that, Mrs. Detman, or Mr. Dotson? Or Mr. Siegel?
I think I'll just add that we had about 40 community members at the pilot team meeting last Friday, and the conversation that we had there was rich and deep, and I think we did a really nice job of looking at the data and letting the data do the talking for itself, and that our next steps really involve visiting various stakeholder groups and resident groups, and also some events around the community to help residents and citizens contextualize the data and tell us the story around the numbers. So I'm really excited about that, and the board will have the same kind of experience that our resident and other stakeholder groups will have.
Sure. Mr. Dotson, anything you want to add to that?
Ditto.
Ditto, okay. Right. Okay, we'll move on then to our consent portion of our agenda, including the following items: the meeting minutes of April 23rd, 2019, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, contracts under 10,000, construction bid request logs and travel, the 3 asbestos abatement IFBs for West, Eisenhower, and Haskell schools, the recurring contracts for Nucella Pro and the addendum to the consulting agreement for accounting assistance, and the other consent items, including the prevailing wage resolution and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Second by Mr. Rollins. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the consent items.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We are now into the closed session consent agenda, including the following: the appointment of Jenny Keffer as the 12-month high school principal at Auburn High School, the appointment of Michael Vella as the 12-month director of facilities operations, design, and construction, the appointment of Jonathan Manning as a 12-month technology services coordinator, the appointment of Jennifer Speaks as a 10-month dean at Jefferson, the appointment of Amy Powell as a 10-month dean at Cherry Valley Elementary School, the salary adjustment for non-bargaining employees, the HR organizational report and addendum, and the following closed session student discipline items. Unless otherwise modified below, the board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. Students 4271, 4273, 4275, and 4277 are expelled for the remainder of this school year and through the end of the 1920 school year. Student 4272 expulsion is held in abeyance, contingent upon an EIA agreement for the remainder of this school year and all of next school year, the 1920 school year. And the following students are receiving EIAs, and this is a long list, so hang on. Students 1047, 3820, 3821, 3824, 3826, 3872, 3873, student 3874, 3875, 3876, 3877, 3878, 3879, 3880, 3881, 3882, 3883, 3884, 3885, 3886, 3887, 3888, 3889, student 3890, 3891, 3892, 3893, 3894, student 3895, 3896, 3897, 3898, and student 3899. Is there a motion and a second to approve these closed session consent items?
So moved.
By Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes. I'm sorry.
I was trying to get my light on.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Do you have an item you want? Oh, you want?
Yes, 12.
12, okay. So we're now voting on the items that are not pulled and from closed consent. And so item 12 is pulled.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
I'll now take a motion and a second to approve closed session item number 12, which is student discipline.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor, seconded by Mr. Dixon. Have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the student discipline.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Abstain.
Mr. Dixon?
Abstain.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses to abstain.
Okay. Our next agenda item is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
All right, I'm going to cede the majority of my time to Mr. Slife to give a report on transportation, but I want to echo Mr. Rounds' kind words about Mr. Escobedo's service to our district. Thank you so much, and we are so sad to lose you, but so appreciative of the consistent voice you've been for the student and advocating for better outcomes for our students, and your presence on our board will be greatly missed. I also want to thank our teachers for coming tonight to advocate about something that you believe is going to drive better outcomes for our students as well. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to advocate on behalf of Seesaw. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Slife to talk about our year in transportation, and I think there's some positive news.
Good evening. Mike Slife, Executive Director of Transportation. And we're going to talk about our school year 17-18 data versus the 18-19 and then what's coming up. So as we know, we had less drivers this year. So we squeezed everything together and did less routes. So instead of 202, which was fairly average, we went down to 190. And as you'll see, that also increased how many students were on each bus. The average went up and the average ride time went up, which neither one is ideal. You can look through anticipated for next year. We'll have less routes. Our students will be on the bus less amount of time, and there'll be less students for each route. The glaring number that is up there that I want to address is number of students transported. And that's a combination of, we switched routing data, so it's a little cleaner than what we had before. And the other thing is because we only had 190 routes, we did everything in our power to make sure every student that was listed on each bus actually rode. So we spent a lot more time saying that student doesn't ride, we're not putting them on a bus, so that we didn't have to increase routes because we didn't have a way to get them there. For this year versus next year, right now in the morning, we have 2,807 students that ride 50 minutes or longer. And in the PM, 4,413. Next year, we're anticipating 250 in the morning, 500 in the afternoon, and I'm being conservative, so hopefully those will be less. Total miles, since 2010-11, we've gone down 1.1 million miles average for the year, through the years. A lot of that's attributed to the fact that we're zone schools, so we don't have to go all over for each school. Looking forward, we have 261 buses right now, averaging 6.38 years. We're going to be at 220 buses next year, and we will be at that recommended 5-year rolling average. So really excited about that. Again, this year, we won a grant award through the EPA for school bus rebate. So 6 of our buses, again, just like last year, we are destroying them for $20,000 instead of getting the $1,500 for scrap metal that we would out of them, or trade-in value. They give us the same. Our challenges this year, our driver shortage, our driver attendance, the weather was pretty bad, and our employee morale. So what we've been doing, we developed the attendance bonus, which is every pay period. We've done a monster bus event, trick-or-treating on the school buses over Halloween. And we did a beginning of the year cookout, and then we had a winter, and we're going to have an end of the year lunch. And then we did some recognizing of employees, our veterans. We did a program for them. And then perfect attendance parking. I take everybody who had perfect attendance for the month and raffle off my parking spot. So everybody gets a chance to have a better spot than me. This is just pictures for our veterans program. We took pictures from them, and we did a thing where we would guess which driver it was from back when they served and did a thank you. And I believe we ate at that one too. We eat a lot. So it's kind of fun. And this is a picture from our Halloween event and just some of the cast characters that were doing some stuff. If you remember from the nutrition services, they had a bus there too as well. Our driver's attendance bonus that we are doing for each pay period, we are averaging about 66% of the drivers awarded. I do have a lot of drivers come to me and say, I wasn't going to come in today, I'm not feeling it. It was sunny, it was rainy, whatever it was, but I'm in line to get that bonus, and I came in. So, and what we've been doing, driver training, we do a beginning of the year meeting. We go over all of our policies and procedures, make sure everybody's ready to go. And then anytime we have an accident, we do post-accident training. Mirror stations is going through and making sure that each mirror is adjusted so that they can see all the way around the bus, and then whatever other driver training they need. And then our mid-year trainings, we covered driver conduct, controlling bullying on the school bus, violence prevention, winter bus driving skills, and then referrals and those drivers' expectations. And thank you for your time. Any questions?
Yeah, I was looking at, you said you expect the number of children riding to go down, 17,000?
I'm assuming that now that our data is very clean, that we will have just a small drop. Yeah, just because we seem to be doing less and less each year.
Do you know if that's high school, middle school, or do you have some type of...
It's been across the board, really.
Okay.
So mainly in high school, though.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to put is, if, we got to go work through the insurance through, but I would like to ride a bus once, and just, because I had some complaints, and I would like to ride just to ride.
You come down any day, and we can get you on a route.
So I'll let y'all work out the logistics of it. It won't be this year, though.
Okay.
But we'll do set it up for next year.
You can pick one that you have a complaint on and ride that bus, or you can pick any bus.
Whatever you decide, I'll put up to y'all.
I can pick a really good one for you, or a really, no. So yeah, not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Connor.
Yeah, on the average age of the fleet, mostly the trend is down. Do you know if that will continue for next year? It says 6.38 for this year, so
Right.
I assume...
6.38 for this year, 5 for next year, and then we should remain at that 5.
Okay. And that is, was that our original target, was the 5?
The 5-year was the target.
That's what I thought. Okay. So we're really, compared to what we've had before, that's really made a big difference. I think then the other thing is that is there any thought about the routes continuing to go down, or are we kind of leveled off on the number of routes?
It should remain right around that 165. We'll see where we can tweak it after we see how the whole thing goes.
Okay, so that, you think that's...
That should be pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Siegel.
I'm sure you, or I hope you do this anyway, but you have a post-accident training. The things that you list there seems like they'd be good pre-accident training too. Seems like they'd be fast, easy, quick, and probably just, I guess, good frequent reminders to the bus drivers. Oh, yeah.
Yep. We actually, and I didn't put that on there, we actually do that at their bid day when they come in to bid on their routes, which takes all week. But every driver comes in, they bid on their route, they go out to the parking lot, they get their bus, they go through the mirror station, and we take them out on an obstacle course to make sure that everything's going well before we go out on the road.
Mr. Rollins.
So I'm curious on the propane buses. I can remember when we bought our first propane buses, we had some reliability issues. But then I think we added some additional propane buses through some IEPA grants. How are we doing on the propane buses? And I noticed that we're not buying propane buses. I think they're more expensive up front. But how's the life cycle cost compared to the diesels?
Right now, the life cycle cost is supposed to be a lot less expensive. And that's part of their telling you that you can buy it. We haven't found that to be true. And I'm not sure yet if it's because we don't know how to work on that style bus and that we're better at diesel, or if we just got a bad batch. So we haven't purchased any more since.
Okay.
But yeah, we're still kind of working on that.
And then we're dropping our number of buses by about 41 buses. I'm just curious what we're going to do with those 41 buses. Are we keeping any of them in reserve? Are we getting rid of them? How are we doing that?
We will still have a reserve so that when something breaks down, we can swap out, because we're going to run 165 routes. We'll have 220 actual buses. So we have a good reserve. Most of them are worth their scrap. So we haven't found really anybody who wants to buy them. And their trade-in value, when we asked, was between $1,000 and $1,500, which is what we would get at Bear. And then we also, so right now we're planning on scrapping most of them. But I believe we are going to try to auction some off just to see if there's any interest.
Okay, thanks.
Mrs. McCullough.
So next year is going to be our first year of 3 tiers, right? And that's in part, the large part of that is to reduce the time on routes. And we'll have 165 routes, but we're keeping the same number of drivers, basically. 207, 205 is not much change.
Correct.
How does that happen?
That being at 205, we're fully staffed. Right now, I'm about 40 people short. So we run mechanics, we run prep people, I've driven, we run all of our supervisors. We're all driving right now to make everything work.
But the 207 this year, you're about 40 down?
Yep.
And you're anticipating you'll still be 40 down for next year?
No.
But we just don't need that.
We just won't need that, so through
okay,
natural
the numbers don't
attrition-
look like that,
Right.
so got it.
So the 205 will actually be fully staffed.
So you don't really have 207 drivers?
Yeah, we do.
You do, but you just usually have that many absent? That you're filling 40 spots, is that what you're telling me? I'm missing something here.
If we don't have backup drivers, we don't have corner drivers, we don't have a lot of the different positions that we normally do to make things run efficiently.
What's a corner driver, please?
For our corner drivers, we usually do 4 to 6, and we put them out in various parts of our district, because we're 151, 52 square miles, so that if something breaks down, we have a bus close by so that it doesn't take from Christina Street a half hour to get to a bus out to and get those kids to school.
So we don't have those when we're...
Yeah, we're not running that right now. We are running very short, which is a pretty good disservice.
So the state reimbursement on transportation, is it based on number of students we're transporting?
It's based off our total costs, and then it's an allocated set money.
Percentage.
So the delta in the number of students that we're transporting shouldn't affect what the reimbursement is, or if it does, that's been adjusted in the budget.
Yeah, it shouldn't have a huge impact.
And I was going to ask the same question, Mr. Rollins, and that is, we are not buying any more propane buses. We'll only get diesel going forward? Is that what I heard you say?
I will revisit the propane unless you want me to look. Right now, I'm planning on revisiting the propane once those propane buses come up.
And why is it we have a gap in the technical piece or the mechanical piece of taking care of those buses?
It's something new and different. It runs more.
But we've had them for a few years.
Right, and
we don't have people up to speed on them yet. Is that what I hear you saying?
Well, and I think when we bought into them, it was brand new on school bus technology, so we've been working through that. That's also one of the buses that caught fire.
And then we, and I haven't seen it come through, maybe it has, you bid out on the gas for the diesels, right?
Yes, we do.
And then when you have a dip in the year, and I don't know, our costs went down for gas on an individual basis, but I don't know if it changed much on diesel. Did we save this year based on what we were bid, or do we have to pay what we bid even if it goes down in the market?
We pay for what we purchase. It's not a set like we spend.
Okay, so what we bid out is what we're going to...
Right. So whatever we're using, we pay for that. We don't pay for a lump sum extra if we use less.
It'll be, that would kind of be an interesting piece on your
On that spreadsheet, there's a diesel used and price overall.
Oh, on the other spreadsheet?
Yeah,
Okay, not the one that you just presented.
yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is I want that little green costume on your Halloween.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
Okay. Mr. Escobedo.
So, and I know this is out there, but just thinking of all the options, we briefly had exchanged some comments a while back about, finding opportunities with, 30 to 45 minutes per ride and potential learning opportunities for kids where there was rolling buses, smart classrooms, whatever they're calling it.
Mm-hmm.
Any updates on that, or is that completely out for us?
I can update you. Our 8 multifunction school activity buses that we are purchasing for athletics, each one of those I'm going to put in a different camera system than what we currently use, and it has the capability and the ability to give the students Wi-Fi, and they've promised that they can lock it down and do it, so we'll be able to test that out on those 8 buses. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask one more question, please,
Sure.
Mr.?
Yep.
The cameras on the buses, not the ones that
Right.
we can learn, the smart, but the videos.
Mm-hmm.
Do we rotate them to different buses, or are we at a point where they all have them now? Or?
All the buses have at least 2 cameras on them that are running all the time. They're all on a DVR. Most of them are 3 cameras.
Okay, and that information, does it just go directly downtown? Is it kept in a bank? Is there a time frame on
It
that?
stays on the DVR that's in the bus, and then right now, what we do is if we have a problem or an event, we go out, we take the DVR out, we bring it in, we capture that video, we keep it, store it on our server, and put the DVR back. One of the things that we're trying with this other system is the fact that it has the Wi-Fi. We will be able to type in what we want. It'll just do it, and we don't have to go out to the schools, pull DVRs or anything like that. So.
There was a time when I was on this board a long time ago, we didn't have them on every, does anybody remember this?
Right.
And you didn't know which bus had them and which bus didn't have them.
Yep.
So I shared this with Dr. Jarrett the other day. I was driving over Whitman Street Bridge, and there's old beat-up, faded yellow school buses in front of me, and blue smoke billowing out the back or whatever, and I thought, man, I hope that's not one of ours. And when I pulled up alongside, it was another school district's bus. It wasn't one of ours, so I was real happy about that. But I just want to thank Mr. Rollins, because for the 8 years that I've been on this board, he's been the school bus champion for getting our fleet to where it is today. And I don't remember where it was in 2011. You probably remember that, but no, okay. But it's a lot better than it was as far as the age of our fleet. which is huge in safety of our kids that are riding buses that are not going to break down and get into accidents, all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Mr. Rollins. Okay, thank you, Mr. Slife. Okay. All right, so we will move on then to our action items for tonight. And our first action item is the College Board for Thurgood Marshall. Dr. Solstice presented this. Is there a motion and a second to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Siegel.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of action item 15A, which is the College Board for Thurgood Marshall.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our second item for tonight is the Pearson K-12 Solutions for Thurgood Marshall that Dr. Solstice presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Siegel.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on action item 15B.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo? Yes. Mr. Dixon? Yes. Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our third item is the Seesaw program that was presented by Susan Urim last board meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Mrs. McCulloch?
Somebody was supposed to get back to us with the percentage of parents in the district who have access to devices so that they can participate in the program. Because that was one concern, and what the plan would be for parents who don't. I mean, I know pretty much everybody has a cell phone, but not everybody has a cell phone, and, how are we going to keep the other parents up, engaged? And, I mean, if we totally rely on this, I thought it was you, Matt.
Okay, Dr. Jarrett?
We don't have, I don't know that we have access to that exact data. I do know that the last time we checked, it was somewhere between 85 and 90% was what was self-reported. Mr. Dotson Jr., any newer information that you can share on that?
No, I mean, I think that's accurate. I think what it comes down to I think to Mrs. McCulloch's point is what I think you're saying or asking is how many of our teachers, I mean, it is a great product, but how many schools are using it and teachers are using it in the classroom? Is that what you're?
No, I just want to have a plan for parents who don't have access to a device so that they can get these updates and reports so that they're not out of the loop and we aren't just totally dependent on that one.
Well, I think Dr. Jarrett is accurate in his, in his percentages. It's in the 85 percentile.
That's 15% of our parents. So I just want to know that we're thinking about a plan to keep them engaged as well. I'm excited that, this was a ground up. The teachers were really interested and have been using it and have found that they could even use it to a greater extent if they have the paid version. I'd like, and I will support it, no problem. But when we put our money into an initiative like this and then we just let people teachers choose to use it or not, instead of having it used district-wide, I mean, it can go both ways. And I understand the groundswell, and I understand that the more that it gets used, perhaps the more we'll draw in other teachers. But as a parent, if I had a teacher in a classroom who wasn't using it, and I'm hearing all these things that are happening, my next door neighbor whose kid is using it, there's a little bit of a disparity. So I guess we have to start from this point, but at some point in time, if it really is such a great product, because you sold me, then why wouldn't we want to be using it district-wide? And the one we're buying is just for K through 2. Is that correct? And if there's some third graders that want to use it, third grade teachers, they're going to be able to use that, and that's it for now?
Sure, we're putting our emphasis on K-2 at the moment. We've also adopted Schoology as our learning management system, and we're exploring how that can be more useful for older students. Seesaw really fits this niche for us with K1 and 2 at the moment, and that's where we're focusing our energy. That said, we can also increase our licenses by 10% with no financial impact in our agreement with the company. So if we have more than 6,000 students interested, then we're able to accommodate that as well.
And then my last question is about rollout and PD. I know that they're giving like a day, and there are Seesaw classes in the catalog for the August PD as well, correct?
Yes, there's
Are
time.
we, again, I want as many teachers to be able to use it and to get the most out of it, you know, and not have to do all the research on their own on all the different pieces. Are we going to be able to roll that out to enough teachers who want that training and information? Is there, or there's not limited spaces on those?
There's not limited space in terms of beyond Institute Day. The onboarding into Seesaw, the platform, is done electronically. Please correct me if and when I go wrong. And so a teacher can log on anytime, any place to get the training that they need. What they'll have the advantage of on Institute Day is some in-person support, but that's why we have all of our kind of Seesaw ambassadors throughout the district as well, implanted in all of our schools, and Susan Urim as well, who can go out and help anyone who'd like to get started.
You almost like have to have a group of Seesaw addicted teachers together to have meetings and.
Well, and to your earlier point about it being kind of a mandated tool, I just want to kind of back up a couple of feet and take a look at the life of the kindergarten teacher over the last 3 years. We've rolled out Reading Horizons, we rolled out new math curriculum, we rolled out new integrated literacy curriculum. The entire instructional day is new in the last 3 years. What I don't want to do is force something that's really great for teachers and kids into a mandate when they've already had their entire instructional day upturned over the last 3 years. What I'd rather do is have demand swell for such a valuable tool, and we provide it when people are ready. I think, without a doubt, really, we're going to get to the point where we're in every classroom in K1 and 2, and we'll do so without having to have a mandate.
Awesome. And I, too, want to thank you for being here, and parent who left, too. So
Mr.
thank you.
Escobedo. Were you done?
So, yeah, I think, Ms. Edmond, that's exactly one of my concerns, is that we've had way too many initiatives. You know, it's pretty hard, but I'm just trying to understand is, so we've got great success, and we've had, you know, some great teachers here at Whitehead who demonstrated that it's a great tool. But the question is, if we're not going to mandate it, if we're not going to force it, but it's such a great tool, how do we successfully roll it out throughout the district and use it efficiently so that everybody's, you know, as a parent, the concern I've shared before is that you've got two kids in the same school, similar grades, and they're using completely different tools. And just that goes every year teacher dependent. The other question I have is, you know, recently the board approved district management consulting group. That was a very hefty prize. Has this been evaluated by them?
They wouldn't necessarily, as a part of that contract, evaluate a particular product, but in terms of what you're asking really is about the academic return on investment of purchasing this product,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it's being used already. By making an investment into the technology itself, it gives us district-level usage data. By looking at our Seesaw dashboard and also some tools available through ECRA, we're going to be able to look at student growth scores and usage and be able to ask deeper questions and draw some conclusions. I believe Emily even stated, can she make a one-to-one correlation between, you know, X number of projects on Seesaw and X number of RIP points? No. But it contributes to a successful learning environment where students are engaged, students are owning their learning, and parents are welcomed into a classroom. That makes a difference. It really does. In terms of kind of making it a hard rollout, we're just not there right now. We're just not. This is kind of we say this a lot, crawl, walk, run. And our crawl was starting 3 years ago with some interested teachers, a couple classrooms sprinkled throughout the district. Since then, it has spread significantly. When you think about it, we already have nearly 6,000 students active. That's nearly the total number of students that we have in kinder, first, and second. So the question that I'm going to be asking by January is who isn't using it yet? And if you're not, why not? And we're also going to go back and look at our data and say, how is it being used and where are we seeing success? And that's where we need to talk to teachers and really find out what's working for families and working for teachers and working for students, and then let that grow naturally.
Okay. Yeah, to me, I think tools are overrated sometimes. It's about having something that you consistently use with rigor and continuous consistency. But why wouldn't district management group evaluate it from the ROI standpoint?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Jarrett, but their role really is to teach us and to build our capacity in exercising our muscle around academic ROI so that as a district we can identify those 3 to 5
We will be identifying 3 projects that are significant projects next year, and they will be training us to integrate that in moving forward. I think just from some preliminary conversations we've had, you can see how that's starting to change our thinking. Mrs. Detman talked very specifically about how we are going to be analyzing both the inputs. We'll look at what teachers are doing. We'll look at the outputs of what students are doing, and we'll ultimately tie it to the student outcome of growth. So we have a beautiful framework in place to study the academic return on investment for this work, even without it formally going through that process. But remember, that work is a 2-year process to build our capacity as a district. It was not something that we push a button and improve the contract 2 months ago, and we immediately internalize all that information. It will be a huge part of next year's budget process. It will be a huge part of board presentations moving forward. There's also more than half of that work is a strategic budgeting component where we'll be working with principals to build the budget. But so I think a lot of those elements are in place here, but it is certainly it is not something that we are fully trained to do at this point. But that is what is coming, absolutely. That additional analysis is something that we want to grow in our ability to do so. And I do think that the way Mrs. Detman described the investment does very closely follow those tenets. I think we're going to have a very strong ability to at least correlate minutes used to ultimate growth for the teachers that are using it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think I've said this before, but time is not on our side. And, when we talk about evaluating something a year from now, 2 years from now, students will have left school by then, left our district. Some students will have just moved on to another teacher. So teachers have a semester with a student sometimes, and so time is not on our side. Thank you for answering my questions.
Mr. Connor.
Just a couple points. Number one, I had a number of questions at the Committee of the Whole. Thanks to Mrs. Detman. She answered, I thought, pretty well. I think the one aspect that I appreciate and I would like to see something come out of this, I'm very much in favor of this, but I think it would be nice to see something that shows how everything fits, and there's a good verbal description. And so what I'd like to see is something that it's kind of obvious where the gaps are and what we're filling on each of these. So tonight you said that that there were some means that we had for the older grades. This was communication on the lower. So I think having that be obvious, because the one thing I think, and if I might interpret Mr. Escobedo, is that we have spent a lot of money on tools, and I think sometimes we're not 100% sure, I'm speaking for me as a board member, exactly how it fits. And I know, full transparency, I've talked to Mr. Bartel about this, that it would be good to see how, particularly on the software side, where all this fits. So that's one comment. And again, did a very good job, and thank you for the answer. I still think having something that's clear on how it fits would be helpful. Second thing is, there was an issue brought up about what I'll call the access side. And I think that's a larger question on the technology side, is that how do we guarantee across all grades, all schools, that if we have techniques where we have it as an assumption, something like a smartphone, we need to have some kind of strategy on that so that if we have to fill the gap on the, I think it was 85% have it, on the 15% that don't, what do we do about that? We've talked about that generally speaking. So I'd like to make sure that that is so noted and we do come back to that.
Mr. Dixon.
Mr. Connor stole my thunder because that was my thing. It was what are we doing about the 15% or 10% of parents that do not have the access to internet? And I think that speaks to even a bigger concern of Rockford, period. That they don't have access. Some people, I understand, some people don't have it because they don't want it, but some don't have it because of the resources. And I'm the parent that I have that with my son, the program, and she does send me pictures of the things that they do. But when she's in discipline, she sends me a text, a long text. And so I'm the parent that does call and say, let me speak to my son while he's getting ready for the test. And so it does work. It is, so I'm for it. I would like to see, like you said, everybody using it.
Mr. Rollins.
I guess I just want to articulate a completely different concern, which is there's probably going to be more of these concepts developed over the years. This is the direction things are going. And we talk about the need to communicate with people, and my concern is maybe we're communicating with them too much. And speaking as a parent who is being communicated with a lot by the school district, and I think we really risk communication overload, and I think we risk becoming background noise, which is, why I start ignoring emails from the superintendent asking me to take surveys. So I would like to just ask that the administration particularly start screening proposals like this with that thought in mind, that I think we need to be strategic in how we communicate and when we communicate, so that we're communicating the right things at the right time and with the correct sense of urgency, so that people can prioritize the communications that they're getting as well. This sounds great, and I suppose that I can just ignore anything that, any text that I get that I don't want to pay attention to, but, I work full-time. My wife works full-time. I don't know that I want to be getting pings all day about what my kids are doing in kindergarten or first grade. So just keep that in mind, and keep in mind that we risk, I think, really overloading people with all of the different things we're throwing at them. And I don't think I'm the only person who feels that way, because I get comments from other parents who have kids in the school district. So just think about it.
Interesting. Okay, any other? Lights still over here. Mr. Siegel.
I'm kind of the opposite of Mr. Rollins on this. I think that Seesaw could be a really, really useful tool for communicating something that I think baffles a lot of people. If we can move this into third and even fourth grade, we do a pretty good job of communicating kindergarten, first, and second without this having been a mandated program. We got pretty good coverage amongst those students who are actually performing amongst the best in the district. But in third grade, there is this really, really sharp drop-off in performance, and I think that often confuses a lot of people, like why? I mean, we hear it explained to us as, up through grade 2, they're learning to read, and in grade 3, they're reading to learn, but there is this consistent sharp fall off in third grade. If we have this sort of information that's up to the minute going home, and parents are becoming aware that, oh, it's that important that my kids can read, perhaps there is this heightened awareness of how to solve this particular issue. I had kind of intended to ask this at the committee of the whole meeting, but we had kind of a lot of questions and then wasn't sure that there was really room for this. So sorry for the conversational tone of the question, but does it seem like Seesaw would be a useful tool in 3rd grade and 4th grade? I know the demonstrations we saw, it's like, how do you draw a blue rectangle? It seems a little elementary, but are there applications for this in 3rd grade? Say, yeah, your kid learned to read this today.
There are, certainly. You're more the expert than I am, but there are applications for all ages of students. And as I mentioned before, we're really concentrating our efforts on K1 and 2, but Susan, you can take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, Seesaw itself is being used through 8th grade quite easily. In fact, there's some high school teachers, not necessarily in our district, but I see examples of like documenting labs and different things. And that's really not meant to communicate just with the parent, it's to document learning. And so even if we shut down the whole communication piece of this application, it still has tremendous value in terms of documenting learning. So, you know, I can see everything kind of being in a balance, you know, in terms of over communication and never getting enough, you know, that kind of thing. But we'll find our way with where it fits for each particular parent, because even if it's a parent who doesn't keep that daily update or doesn't have the smartphone, if they're willing to come and talk, I mean, it allows the teacher to now open up this digital platform and show them everything then. You know, it doesn't have to be in the moment that the parent responds or sees. So anyway, there you go.
Okay, I do get that. But I feel like if this is something that kind of ends at 2nd grade and we have parents who are already familiar with it, they're expecting it, and in 3rd grade it stops, and contemporaneously the performance of their particular student also seems to drop precipitously. Is there a use of Seesaw in making people understand up to the minute that, you know, your kid was doing great up through 2nd grade, and all of a sudden things in 3rd grade are kind of gone sideways?
And I think that's kind of why, oh, I'm sorry.
But it's not as onerous of a sort of communication where you have to have this dreaded phone call. It's like, oh, geez, you know. It's something where parents or guardians are learning of this drop-off at the moment it begins.
Right. Well, and I think that's part of our hesitation to say it can only be in K2, is because what's to say, you know, if I have a teacher who this is a platform that they can use to document learning and use it robustly and use it in an engaging way, and it's 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade, I don't want to say no to them. Sure. But I also want to think about that continuum of growth and how we can document that, and perhaps using, like I said, Google Sites as a way that the kids start to create documentation of their growth and own that throughout their time in RPS. So I think we're also starting to, how do we build a bigger picture of that growth so that our profile of a graduate includes that digital documentation of their learning throughout. And so whether Seesaw can continue to be that, whether it's what's the right platform, or whether it's better to lean on the Google Sites or something to that effect, we have to kind of find out.
Okay. Well, I certainly hope it is something that can go.
Mrs. McCulloch.
How did you choose 2nd grade as a cutoff?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just, based on your question.
Just was more based on interest in usership, that we have more 3rd grade teachers and 4th grade teachers that are already embracing, such as Google Sites, to start documenting that. So it just seemed like that might be a place where we're naturally going to get more people who are wanting to use it.
How many K-2 teachers do we have in the district?
Just short of 300.
And we have 76 using it right now. So that'll be interesting to watch. Thank you.
Okay, how the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the Seesaw program?
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo? Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next action item is the purchase of property at 5052 28th Avenue that Mr. Phillips presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Phillips, are you in the back? There he is. Mr. Rollins goes first.
I don't really have a question. I just have a comment.
Okay.
I want to explain my vote. So the executive summary says that the acquisition cost for the new property is about estimated at $2.5 million, and the estimated cost of keeping the old property is $3.1 million. But as we discussed at the committee of the whole meeting, I just don't think that that's accurate, because the piece that's missing is that we know that Innovative Learning Center is currently located in that building, and we will have to find a different location for them. And so we don't have a number for that. What we've been told is the only number that we were given at the committee of the whole meeting is that it will, if we just build it into their contract price, it'll be $200,000 a year. So in just using that as a plug figure, in 3 years this will be revenue neutral, and in year 4 this starts costing us money. So I can't support this, and I'm just explaining my vote. And I wish that that had been called out in the executive summary, because I think that the executive summaries are not just to explain to the board the administration's rationale, but also to the public the administration's rationale. And I don't think that this is something that we should bury. I think we should talk about it. There are other reasons I understand why you might want to do this. I understand you don't like the location. I understand you have some safety issues. I understand there are some air quality issues there. I think reasonable people can disagree on whether the cost difference is worth those two. And, you know, just based on the information that I have, I don't think it is. So I'm just explaining my vote.
Okay. Mr. Connor.
Well, did you want to answer? Yeah.
It wasn't.
I know, but it had an implied question on the cost part. So, well, all right, I'll ask that. What's the answer on the cost side of the $200,000 being, because it's the $600,000, if you will, savings, so cost neutral in 3 years, and then beyond that, it's going to cost us money. So do you want to answer that?
At this point, Mr. Connor, we are still looking for a suitable location for the Innovative Learning Center. I don't think we've fallen on one location, so we don't have a true cost at this point.
So, all right, sure. I'll answer it.
Mrs. Holden wants to respond to.
I think the other option then is to fix up the current location, which continues to deteriorate in a significant way. So that is a possibility. I guess I'm caught a little bit off guard. I guess we weren't certainly intending on misleading the board at all. It isn't, from the perspective of administration when this was brought forward, it was really the quality of the current facility is driving the reason for looking for another one, and putting in the excess costs that you're going to have to, and the return on investment for that is really not there. So that's why we were looking for another facility. We certainly aren't trying to say that we were trying to save money long-term, although that is a hope to do so, but it's really a practical reason to keep the current employees in that location as well as the students. It really is not a good environment for anyone at all. And I don't know if any of the members took the opportunity to look at the current facility or to walk out into the floor of an area where the rain is pouring in and the way they have to adjust by putting plastic all over everything and seeing all of the issues with that building. I don't know if anyone did, but I guess I'm just caught off guard. So.
Mr. Connor, you want to finish?
Okay. Go ahead if you want to, Mr. Rollins, you look like you want to answer.
Well, I was just going to point out, so the executive summary says the building, we understand that it requires significant renovations, estimated at a cost of $3.1 million. Nobody's disagreeing that it requires significant renovations, including a new roof. That particular building was purchased by the district before I got on the board, but I think the district made significant investments in that building. I'm simply stating the executive summary is not really written in a way that would lead you to believe that the primary purpose for this was you don't like the location and you don't think it's safe. The executive summary is written as if this is a cost savings, and I just don't believe that to be the case. If you want to articulate that you don't think that's a safe location for students and staff, articulate that as the reason why you want to change locations. That's my point.
I think there's also a practical matter of, assuming we go this route, you're also going to be now losing probably 18 months of having folks in that building while we renovate that building. So I think that the loss of productivity and that issue and had we gone that direction, we're probably 6 months out, having kind of committed to this general course of action. As we reviewed the concept, certainly the board has the right to vote how they'd like to vote tonight, but another downside that is difficult to calculate financially is the cost of renovating a building while that level of renovation on a building while individuals attend school in that building and work in that building and delay this for, I would guess, Mr. Phillips would be looking at about an 18 to 24 month time horizon, best case scenario for this level of renovations.
I believe so, yes.
So I do think that has to be calculated into the cost as well.
Mr. Connor.
So, full transparency, I basically had similar comments to a certain extent to say that this is a good example where I think we're doing the right thing, and I'll get to that part, but that we do have to say our intentions. I agree with Mr. Rollins that this looks rather financial in orientation, which is a piece of it. But it really is, number one, the building is unlivable, I think, from my point of view. I've been there a couple times. I have not been there since it's been, doing internal raining. But the point is that at a certain point, I even think that the 3.1 was, maybe conservative in one sense, in that you'd have to redo almost the entire thing. So I really, from a practical standpoint, if I look at this from the commercial real estate standpoint, I just can't imagine somebody walking into a building like that and saying, hey, I'm going to sink $3.1 million. Its shelf life, I think, is done. So what we're trying to accomplish is to get a facility that does multiple things, which this one kind of has been shoehorned into. Now, the ILC part, from my point of view, there is going to be a cost there. I think the part I think that would be helpful as a follow-up is that we do some financial analysis on this kind of thing so that we really have laid out what I'll call scenarios. And I think that is one thing that my opinion is, having talked to the facilities folks now for 6 years, is there's a lot of stuff that they have that are not necessarily articulated on paper. So this is a good example. And if I might say so, to return to an earlier one on the seesaw, I think what you have to ask yourself is, why do some things have a bunch of questions and other things not have as many questions? So there is an answer to that, and part of the answer is it depends on how you prepare and the kind of materials that you put together. So, and I'm not trying to pick on Seesaw or this facilities thing. I'm just saying that this, when you get a lot of questions, it should be some kind of warning flag that there's something about the presentation. So the other thing is that I would say on the economic side, to me, this is worthwhile. And one of the things I've said is we know that we're going to take a lot of other facilities and things in storage and so forth. And there's got to be savings, and there's got to be some things about being in the same neighborhood. Yes, we have to renovate, but there are advantages because it's not necessarily cost neutral on some of these buildings and how we're using it today. So the two suggestions are, one, that we have these scenario-based financial management, and the second thing is, I agree with Mr. Rollins, that we should state our goals more clearly on some of these things to prepare. And so those would be my two suggested follow-ups. And I'm just, to be clear, I'm very much in favor of this.
Ms. McCullough.
When we moved into that old Goodwill building, the company that runs ILC for us, they paid for the renovations for that space. Do you remember that? Will they also pay for whatever they need to do if we provide a different location?
That would be contractual in nature, so it could be. For example, under the space they were looking at, I believe it was a triple net lease, so I know it included renovation costs.
Correct. The space that they're looking at, they were including picking up the renovation cost of the space.
So they are actually looking for a location as compared, and then we would pay for it. And do we give them a budget?
Well, they are already, I'm sure they included the costs of their renovations in what they charged us to begin with. So when you say they paid for it,
I see.
Ultimately, you paid for it through their tuition costs. So no matter what they do, you as the board will end up paying for it. But there also isn't anything saying that you're going to do ILC long-term. So while I guess it all depends on their performance, and currently I believe they're performing to administration's expectations. But again, I'm just, I was taken by surprise on this because I haven't received any questions.
And I will support it because I've been in that building. That building was not great when we got it. And then we had the air quality issues. We've had so many other problems, but not having that piece about ILC and the ombuds and where they're going and what that cost would be. And my understanding is they'll stay there this year, so that's not going to be part of that. That puts that $200,000 off another year. But having all the other pieces for facilities in one location, you know, and the printing, all those pieces, I think, is a benefit to the district. And I agree with the administration that we spent a lot of time on this, and I wasn't aware that there were questions unanswered, but I can also appreciate the perspective. I will be supporting it.
Mr. Dixon.
Yes, I do support this. I guess my concern is that did we do a demolition on the building that, because I can't see nobody coming in and buying the building, then put another $1.3 million into the building. So I think the $600,000 that we're saying that we're going to profit, it's not going to be $600,000 because we have not did actual cost of everything. I think we left some things out, and so like I said, I'm for it. I just don't think it's going to be $600,000 benefit.
So I think in early discussions, we had talked about not taking on the cost of demolition, that there is folks that are potentially interested in the property. Because it's public, we would still have to go through the auction procedure. But I think early on discussions were actually us not assuming the cost to demo that property.
Mr. Escobedo.
So what, yeah, because I think the financial piece was brought up last time as well. So I understand the questions were specifically requested, but it was brought up. So my question is, what impact would it have if this was to be postponed until next board meeting when the data could be presented, the financial piece?
I'd have to look at that closer. I don't think we're under a significant time crunch. So that would be 2 weeks from today. I don't think that would be a time crunch, but I don't know that we would have your answers, is the reason I'm hesitating, because we are trying to come up with a solution for ILC, and we have some other properties potentially that they could look at that would not cost as much, but and also meet the standards for school system. So I don't know that I would have the answers for you.
But at least I think there could be a better financial picture presented with potentially different options, even if not the whole piece is available.
Mr. Siegel?
Would 2 weeks be enough to just rewrite the executive summary so that it includes some of the other benefits of moving, not just the financial situation? Okay, because it seems like that might allay some of the concerns.
One thing that won't change in 2 weeks, and I certainly support delaying so the board gets all the information it needs to make a very important decision, is that we would be putting well over $3 million into an asset that is worth a very small percentage of that, and I think that also needs to be part of the conversation, and we can certainly add that into the executive summary as well. Although I do understand Mr. Rollins' point about the cash flow issue of the ILC coming into play. So we can certainly take all that into consideration and do that. But I think one of the things that needs to be stated is you also have to look at the amount of money you would put into an asset based on what that asset is worth. I think that has to be part of the calculation as well.
Okay.
I would just want everybody to remember that when we were down on Madison Street and we were going to put $1.some million into windows, and for this 1.8 was it? And for the same amount of money we bought this building. And so to me, pouring more money into that facility for any sort of repairs would be like putting new windows on Madison Street.
So I'm getting the feeling that we're going to table this for 2 weeks. The board okay with that or not?
I guess I'd like to put a motion.
I think we should, if somebody wants to make a motion, they can make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
So we do have a motion and a second. So any more?
I made the motion.
Amendment motion?
Yes.
The
table.
He moved to table it.
Okay.
I move to table this to the next board meeting.
Is there a second for that? Okay. So
Sure. I'll second it. We might as well vote on it.
Okay. We'll call a vote, a roll. Call a roll on the
Mr. Dixon?
This is a vote to table, to amend to table it for 2 weeks.
Next one.
Okay? You're voting whether or not you want to table it or not.
You want to vote for it tonight?
No.
Okay.
No, just do a vote.
Mr. Rollins?
No.
Mr. Scrivano?
No?
Mrs. McCulloch? Mr. Siegel?
No.
Mr. Connor?
No.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion fails by 5 noes, 2 yeses.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the purchase of the property on 28th Avenue. So call the roll for that.
Mr. Escobedo?
No.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
No.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes by 5 yeses, 2 noes.
Okay. Thank you. Our next item is under new business, but I don't see Mrs. French here. Is somebody presenting that? Dr. Vosberg is going to present.
I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Okay.
There's no presentation.
All righty. Okay. So this is the Guilford High School OSHA equipment update or something like that,
This was on the agenda back in the fall, and this is a partnership we have through our academies. Rockford Systems is offering to volunteer their time and services to modify, I think, if you look at the contract, there's 4 machines they're going to modify to make them OSHA compliant, which is not
a standard that's used in schools, but it'd be nice to have it if
Right.
someone's going to do it for free, and they are going to do it for free. I know the other issue with the previous reading was around equity with other schools, and they have agreed, and actually they have already looked at other schools, the other 3 high schools, and reviewed their equipment for safety concerns. And I think they identified one machine at one school that they thought was unsafe. But they're not going to make any modifications to meet OSHA requirements for those schools just yet.
Okay. Mr. Rollins, you had a question?
Well, it sort of answers the question. So that, again, the executive summary says that they will do an audit. So back when this was put on hiatus, my understanding was that we were going to do an audit. And that's my recollection from a discussion with Mrs. Hoadley, is that we were just going to do an audit ourselves of all 4 high schools and decide, what needed to be done in each of the high schools and then proceed from there. So what happened to that to that thought? Why are we not doing that?
My understanding is that Ms. French, that Rockford Systems went to each of the high schools and looked at all of the equipment already. I don't believe the equity audit has been done as a whole, and I think it's much more extensive based upon what Mr. Connor was asking for. He submitted in a question before the board meeting, and what he was looking at is for the programs as a whole also to be audited, to make sure that either that or that we transport students if we have a program that is inconsistent. Is that correct, Mr. Connor? Did I state that correctly? So we have not done that as far as I know, and I haven't, I just did not reach out to Ms. French to find out why yet, but we can do that. And that's why we added that in there, indicating yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Rosberg? If not, this will come for a vote on our next board meeting on May 28th. Any other business for tonight's board meeting? If not, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. We adjourned at 8:38. Hey, Emily,